to go to over a lot of commercials. Mine is different.
We're going to get it after just a second.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Gao. Certainly, this has been an honor to be here. By the way, if you have not already done so, register your trademark for saupo. Good morning. I think my presentation is going to be quite different. I think, in terms of opportunities from Asian companies investing in USA, whether it's manufacturing or joint venture or sales office, I think it's important to understand what are the universe out there. I mean, certainly China, India is capturing, is getting all the attention. I guess for the right reason, because you have 25 million SMEs, small, medium-sized enterprises in India, and you have 35 million SMEs from China. Yes, the big boys are here already, obviously, and vice versa. I think Dr. Roy had a good, comment on GE. GE is in everywhere. And certainly the big boys like Wipro and Reliance, Power, and some of the GE's partners, I'm sure they're looking at USA too. But I think, going back to basics, I think Georgia, Atlanta, I think there are more opportunities for small and medium-sized companies here. Basically, either forming joint ventures with companies from Asia coming here, cross-equity holding. What should I just?
I can move that to work.
This is not working. Don't worry, I think it's more interesting. Where? The fact is, it's going to be a lot of small and medium-sized companies from Asia. You're looking at companies with average sales of 70 million to 100 million range. These are your universe. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do some commercial. The company that I represent, we are currently representing a few privately held companies from China. They're looking for U.S. acquisition. 100% in a listed drug company. Oh, it's working out, right? Now, these are the opportunities because, yes, there's going to be issues concerning security. Even if 100% acquisition is not possible, most likely and highly likely, the Asian companies will come here and buy up to 10 to 20% in a Atlantic companies or US company, just to get a broad representation. And for the same reason, the same Atlantic company or US company can basically also invest in the same Chinese company. Obviously, from the Chinese side or Indian side, you're basically looking into consumption opportunity, export in China or India or Asia. And on the reverse side, Chinese companies or Asian companies, and they're getting actually human resources, expertise, funding, capital markets, and you name it, of course, branding. Now, I'm going to go over what happened in the last 23 years of investment in USA, and I would be remiss if I did not mention, I think YKK is probably one of the earliest investors. As a matter of fact, I think we opened the Chicago office in 1979. Obviously, Japanese dominated the investments in the early to mid-90s, early to late 80s. Obviously, Japanese companies, all the transplants are here, from Monster in Michigan in 85 to all Toyota in Kentucky, Smyrna, Tennessee for Nissan, and you name it. And of course, I think they've been very successful since. But also, I have to say that in the early years of the investment, obviously there are a lot of hurdles. And I think this is one reason why I mentioned that there are a number of issues that they have not planned. For example, I think from the very beginning, every single department had two managers, the Japanese manager and the American managers. That's redundant. So it took them a few years to get their acts together. And certainly, the transplants and the suppliers and the component manufacturers are doing extremely well. As a matter of fact, I think using USA, I think this is one of the strategies. In terms of investing in USA, use it as a platform for Latin America and South America. Honda actually started importing cars from Marysville, Ohio to Australia, and then later certainly to South America and Latin America. So I think the trend is really focus on use Atlanta as a base certainly for USA in terms of joint venture opportunity, but focus on the fact that this will be a foundation and gateway to South America and Latin America. Now, obviously, I also want to comment on some of the investments from other countries. Obviously, Korea are also quite active. In the early years, machinery is very active. Mando machinery has been very successful in USA, and also some unsuccessful, I guess, endeavors from, for example, Daewoo America. They introduced 3 passenger car models in mid-1990s in Chicago, and it was a complete failure. So I guess these are lessons to be learned in terms of investments in USA from Asian companies. And I mean, obviously, the Asian investment here, some companies really initially wanted to grow the export business, and certainly also import, and also, more importantly, to really tap into financing. In the early years, these Chinese companies, the state-owned enterprises, they came to USA. These are large companies, Costco, Sinopec, for fundraising. They tapped into the US syndication market, paying, and I remember, I think even Japanese company, Sumitomo, in the late 70s, they were paying like prime plus 1.5 to prime plus 2. So they were tapping into USA for funding reasons, obviously. And certainly, quite a number of Korean companies also followed suit in mid-90s. The LG Electronics, I think they used to be called Lucky Gold Stock. They were also tapping into loan market in the USA. So basically borrowing on behalf of parent companies. That was another form of investment. Certainly banking, a lot of banks are worth setting up offices many years ago. As a matter of fact, I think Japanese banks have more than, I think, 10 in mid-90s in Atlanta, Georgia. So these are investment could be from different forms, manufacturing, sales office, and you name it. And obviously, I think for Asian investment, a source of brand equity is very important. And I think the source of brand equity and also financing are keys. Because financing in Asia, certainly in China for SMEs, is very difficult. That's not the case in India. But I'm trying to focus a little more on China because this is my expertise too. I think there's going to be a lot more Chinese SMEs coming to USA for financing reasons in terms of their investment in joint venture, because even today it's almost impossible to obtain a secure working capital loan. In China, because of security laws are different, but it's changing. So I'm going to focus, I think I've touched upon a lot of content on the slides. The last 20 years, I think this is very straightforward. By the way, I think the forms of investment, at least in the past, has mostly wholly owned subsidiary. And the JVs never work. As a matter of fact, I think some of the Japanese companies, 50-50 joint venture. Later on, they changed to 51 and 49 for obvious reasons. Success stories, I think I mentioned quite a few. Japanese companies certainly has been very successful. Auto company, steel industry, steel companies, such as Sumitomo, I think, and LTE Steel, and joint ventures, Nippon Steel, Tokai. So these are very successful stories from Japan. Certainly, Chinese companies is mostly sale enterprises, larger players, and I believe there are not a lot of Chinese investment in late 90s and early or mid 2000s, and most has been not successful. Now that's why I want to touch upon the challenges of doing business. I think this is key because it will prepare you as potential partners or even acquisition candidates to really to negotiate with your Asian counterparts. These are some of the issues that are really very practical. I mean, for the Asian companies, certain Chinese companies, they're clueless about complex legal system, and at times intimidated because of the federal, state, county, and city level. Commercial transaction, I think UCC, Uniform Customs Code, basically, is different than China. So these are the things that you have to become very familiar with. Liability, product liability, and the others. Intellectual property, obviously, you're quite familiar with. Even company formation in USA, when you're receiving Chinese companies or Asian companies, it's very fast. In China, you have to lease an office space before you even apply or file your registration for your wholly owned subsidiary. So it's very complicated. It's quite different. So this is something that you can, in your discussion, that you should be fully aware of the ease of setting up a company in USA as compared to Asia. Accounting and taxation, obviously, transfer pricing is an issue, and withholding tax. And I think duty drawback, this is something that you should be very familiar with. There's a lot of companies, when they set up operations, they will be importing components, raw material, and then for assembly, USA, and then for final sales to US or other countries. And for those foreign investors, manufacturers, they do enjoy a duty drawback where for the import duties they pay on those components used in manufacturing, at the end of the year you can go after IRS to file those refunds. But this is something that a lot of people are not familiar with. I'm going to skip a few items. Human resources is very key too. I mean, for example, China conflict management is a serious problem. So this is something that maybe companies in Atlantic can offer to the how to retain employees. Foreign pay is not familiar to the Chinese and Asian investors. So this is something that you should take advantage and become more familiar with in your discussion. Investment approval process, again, in the US is pretty straightforward, obviously. I know there are cases where Chinese electronic company, telecom company, want to buy a 3D US company because of security reasons. So that's why I mentioned there's going to be a lot more cross-equity holding, rather than buying 100% equity, 20-30%, which is not unreasonable. Future investments, I'm just go over this quickly. I think someone had mentioned, I think Dr. Roy mentioned 59 billion abroad. I think of that 5 billion were in USA last year from privately held companies. And you can tell in 2009 it was 2.4 billion. So it's more than double. So I think the trend will continue, at least from Chinese company side, in terms of future investments. Also property, I think this is something I want to mention. Like the Japanese, like most Asian, property. I think last year, property in excess of 70 million in USA, mostly in California area. But also compared to London, London had in excess of 200 million transactions. I'm going to go over, actually, 2 minutes time in terms of RMB internationalization. I think this project has been started, actually, in the beginning of 2009 by Chinese government because of their concern about US dollar exposure in terms of their foreign exchange reserve. What it is to allow China to trade with the rest of the globe and settle in Chinese currency rather than US dollar. So initially, Chinese government is taking baby steps in completing this whole process, starting with 5 cities in China, and then starting with cross-border trade with China, with ASEAN countries, and then expanded globally, and then now it's nationwide, basically 20 provinces in China. They can trade directly with the rest of the world, including USA. Actually, the first transaction took place US and China in April of 2010, where it was settled in RMB. But the mechanism is such that the intermediary are the banks, global banks, that can help importers and exporters in terms of settlement in RMB currency. I'm going to go over it quickly. I think this is a very important slide. People ask, will Chinese currency become a reserve currency or be one of the reserve currency replacing US dollar? It's not going to happen within the next 25 years. It's not going to happen. I think Chinese currency will become one of 5 major reserve currencies. 10 years, anybody scares. But when you look at what is the requirement, I think absolutely sizable economy that China has it now. A stable inflation, China has done a great job the last 10 years in terms of maintaining inflation. But the other 3 elements, really, mature monetary and banking system is still growing. Mature debt equity capital market, which is in its infancy stage. So I think China, it will take at least 5 to 8 years for the currency to become convertible, and then reserve currency 8 to 10 years. So right now, there's a lot of errors circulating in terms of the whole process. Basically, China is creating an offshore center in Hong Kong, increasing liquidity, debt, and then increasing liability and asset side of the currency. And obviously, also many of the central banks are already looking at investing in RMB through mechanism that currency swap that China has maintained with 10 countries or so. And certainly, I think the trend will continue. I mean, this is here to stay. I mean, don't be afraid in case you get approached by importer exporters from Asia, China, to settle in RMB. It's happening. I think be prepared. And in closing my speech, I think I have 30 seconds. No, China is huge, but don't underestimate India and also other economies in Asia, because everything is so interrelated these days. China has substantial investment in ASEAN countries, and as well as emerging market. And I believe the next 50 years is going to be Asian-led emerging market economy leading Europe, Japan, and the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thanks to our four panelists for their wonderful presentations. Now we'll start the Q&A time. My students Tane and Magda has a microphone, and they're two PhD students from Ethiopia, by the way, in the International Conflict Management PhD program in the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. So if you have any questions, raise your hand, and you can also point to the speaker you want your answer, or you can just point to anybody you want. There's a question over here from Gail.
Good morning. I have a question for Henry. When you were talking about the challenge...
No question for me.
When you were talking about... Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. When you're talking about the challenges for Chinese companies, one of the things that I found, being in the insurance and benefits area, is companies are not prepared. They know very little about the insurance risk. That when you rent a piece of property or rent a facility, you need to have general liability insurance. We've also found sometimes people have the wrong visas and they have problems in renting cars and just a lot of complex issues. Could you address that?
Well, I think you touched upon a very good point. Keep in mind, the insurance industry is still in its infancy stage in China. Actually, in 2003, the government set up the supervisory body, China Insurance Regulatory Commission, CIC, to regulate insurance industries. And actually, even in China, it's dominated by foreign-owned insurance company in forms of joint venture, allow up to maybe less than 40% equity joint venture in China. So, yeah, you're right. The knowledge on insurance is very limited in China. It's more like property casualty is something that's quite new. I'll give you an example. Life insurance are pretty widely accepted in China, but in other forms of insurance, they are not familiar with, like reinsurance and the name. So, yeah, you're right. I think that's why I joined this company 4 or 5 months ago. Actually, I helped sell this company 6 months ago. It's a wholly owned subsidiary. Our role is basically to help entrance strategy, whether it's U.S. companies go to China or Asia, or Chinese company come to USA. Because really, you need professional service, at least for a Chinese company. But they are not willing to pay retainers fees. And this is something that they're learning, at least from China. So this is, you have to the early discussion and introduction of concepts and ideas, and more importantly, in terms of experience.
One of the other things I've seen is unwillingness of Chinese companies to pay for consulting service.
Well, actually, it's changing, to be honest. I just submitted well, for example, I'm negotiating an acquisition where a Chinese company they're willing to pay 7 to 10 million to buy a listed company in USA. Say, use 5% as your fee to help identify and to close the transaction. In USA, based on that, you can basically get $75,000, $100,000 retainer for 1 year. In China, you'll be lucky to get 10% of, say, $10,000 as a retainer. And in addition, in China, the Chinese company will pay you only if you're successful. So if you're successful in getting this deal, so the $10,000 they pay will be deducted from the transaction fees. So they're learning.
It's a process.
It's a process.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Guamin Fang asking a question.
Another question for Henry, popular guy today.
Welcome back, first of all. I'm very interested in the currency point that you raised, and because that is one of the most, the largest challenge my clients face when doing business with China. And I have recently read an article, I believe on Wall Street Journal, saying that Bank of China has opened a bank account in New York where you get a U.S. citizen or a U.S. company can set up an RMB account, which can be accessible from China. Do you know anything about that?
Well, actually, I think in my presentation, I referenced ICBC in New York. They're opening RMB account, yuan account, even for U.S. citizens. If you allow, I believe you allow to even exchange U.S. dollar, open the yuan account, RMB account with ICBC or something for Chinese banks in New York. Now, that's on the flip side.
So is that a first step of Chinese currency becoming like a global acceptable?
Well, first of all, I think what China is doing right now here is, I think the first phase has been completed in terms of promoting and encouraging cross-border trade between China and the rest of the world and settled in RMB. Okay, the mechanism to handle this is basically use Atlanta as an example. Say SunTrust Bank as a client, or Touchmark as a client, who want to import and export, right? And want to receive or pay in RMB. If Touchmark or SunTrust Bank has a RMB account onshore in China, that's the time to do it. Okay? That is a requirement. And also, to settle trade, it has to be buying and selling of goods and services. Now even expanded to include, even, for example, McDonald's issued its first RMB bond in Hong Kong to basically issue the bond in RMB and then use it as increase in paid-in capital back to China. So you don't need to even raise McDonald's, they don't need to raise US dollar for the operation in China. They can basically use Hong Kong now. Caterpillar did that, quite a number of companies through Hong Kong, and they bring the money back to China for funding or for expansion purpose. So even US companies are allowed to maintain RMB accounts in China, but it's a little bit more restricted. But in Hong Kong, it is free. Chinese currency is not convertible, but the Chinese currency in Hong Kong is fully convertible outside China. Did I answer your question?
Thank you. Question on the other side. Run.
My question is for Henry too. Not a question for you. You were talking about China companies willing to invest in the U.S. and all the restrictions that are in the U.S. Have you thought of working with the cities and states to get an incentive? Like, for example, in Chicago, when Boeing and Miller Beer moved their headquarters to Chicago, they were given millions of dollars in incentives in order to get the jobs there. Is that something?
Well, actually, I think I should mention many states offer tax credits for job creation. I'm sure Georgia is one of the states, I'm pretty sure. So, I mean, that kind of information in your early phase, in your negotiation with Asian companies, I think these are the strong selling points. Use Atlanta as your gateway to South and Latin America, and I'm sure Hoy would agree. Hoy is an anti-financial chamber, but do your homework. I think the one page I have challenges, those are the issues that you should become very familiar with, working with your CPA firms, lawyers, service providers, so that when Chinese or Asian companies come here, you let them know, oh, by the way, it takes 1 day to apply in terms of company registration. In China, it's a painful process. I'll give you an example. It took us 4 months to get our registration right. We set up a company late last year in November, so it takes time. But here, so these are the advantages, really. And Chinese companies certainly, I think the next wave is going to be small, medium-sized companies. These are a profile of the company. These are 75 million to 200 million range sales companies. It's going to be substantial.
We have another question.
Good morning, Dr. Adrienne Randolph, Kansas State University, and Director of the KSU Brain Lab at the Coast College of Business. This is mostly directed to Cindy, but certainly for other members of the panel. What specific opportunities are you exploring in Georgia, since we've heard about Macon and Dublin from YKK?
Sure. Thanks. I'm glad I had a question. See, Georgia has been important to us for 3 or 4 specific reasons. One is obviously clients. So it has some very large global corporations that we work with today, and we continue to expand our presence with them. It has been important from a talent perspective because we've been, let me give you a sense of the kind of talent we're looking for. We've been growing at an average growth rate of about 30% for the last 11 years, which means that this year, with a base of 140,000 employees, we will hire another 40,000 employees globally. And with the largest market being in the US, there will be a significant hiring growth of thousands of employees in the US. And these employees have to be located close to our clients. So if Georgia has a number of large clients for us, large banks, large retailers, large consumer goods companies, it's important that we hire from Georgia. So we've been actively hiring from Georgia Tech so far, and I really anticipate that hiring net will become wider as we continue to increase the number of engineers in particular, and then MBA students that we hire within Georgia. The third is acquisitions. We are constantly scouting for acquisition candidates. Henry spoke about it. We've made 1 acquisition in Atlanta already. I talked about McCamish Systems. We are always evaluating about a dozen candidates in terms of which companies make the best strategic fit from our perspective. The fourth is research and innovation, which is joint research and innovation plans along with academic institutes, along with corporations, for the next breakthrough in certain industries. I think across all those 4 facets, Georgia is extremely important to us and will remain very important to us. Thank you.
If we have any questions for Mr. Gregory or Mr. Kim, if you raise your hands, I'd like to give the other speakers a chance to talk because we're coming to that time. It's time for a coffee break, so.
Mr. Gregory, I'm Marissa, good to see you. Yeah, just back from Tokyo. I would like, and Mr. Kim as well, could you give us a long-term scenario? What is it like to operate a multinational company in 2 countries? What are the issues for the next 10 or 20 years that you're going to need to address? Well, for both. Thank you so much.
First of all, we're a family-owned company. Tadal Yoshida founded the company. His son, Pat Yoshida, who was educated at Northwestern, is our president now. We're very philosophically based. And President Yoshida loved the state of Georgia. His first relationship was with Governor Carter, and we continue with Governor Busby and so many other wonderful governors. So we have a commitment to the state of Georgia to expand as much as we can here. And I showed you some of the many areas into which we have diversified, and we're excited about many of them that could explode and lead to nice things. For example, the vinyl windows for houses. We started that just a few years ago, but we're right on track. In spite of the market conditions, we're right on track with our sales. We're growing geographically. As soon as the commercial building and residential building markets come back, you're going to see us as a major force in the state of Georgia, and we'll expand those. On the fastening side, again, we're just trying. We have a very strong product development team down in Macon, and they're making literally hundreds of samples each week for our customers and for our prospective customers, any one of which could. We created a product, actually this one's up in Kentucky, but it's called Snap. It's to allow you to attach snaps to like boats and things like that, but you're going to see that product explode, and we'd love to have it in the state of Georgia too. But I guess long term, over the next 20 years, we will continue to be here, we hope, and we'll continue to expand and look for every opportunity we can. I mentioned earlier that about 75% of what we produce in Macon is exported to Mexico and Central America. I should mention that we also have manufacturing plants in Mexico and Central America. So I think that shows what we're about in trying to continue to provide jobs and opportunities here.
Okay. So with Houston Motors America is the most of the market is eastern side market, most important also big size. So we have to stand here continues to provide our product and service to our customers. Second is the reason, as we are most important market is the Central America and South America. So it's time is same, and then we are mostly higher. It's the speaking the Spanish guys, people, and then we are continuous growing. It's the base here, and then we are growing with the operation growing, and then operation South American market. Here is the South American market bigger than is the America, about is 5 or 10 times. So we have this keep the location here and then operation for North and South American market.
Any other questions?
Hi, I'm Travis Vendra, and I've got a question for Alex. I'm wondering why you moved into architecture from zippers and how that came along.
You'd have to go back about 50 years. And by the way, Henry, we opened our first operation in the United States in Long Island City in 1960.
So I knew that you once you got there. I was home.
You go back about 50 years when YKK was manipulating various metals to make zipper teeth, aluminum being a primary one. And some entrepreneurial soul decided they could take that aluminum and make something else as well. And we started venturing out into other opportunities, and architectural products were the result.
Thank you.
Henry, following up on your comment about small to medium-sized companies coming in from China, how much interest do they have in the Southeast? And also, are they bringing cash or do they refinance?
Well, they're bringing cash. And, well, use of credit is changing, but you know, it's unfortunate. I think this may be an opportunity for Atlanta, Georgia. Give me an example. Sinomac, China National Machinery Equipment Corporation in China, state-owned company. They were leading a delegation to Detroit, Michigan. I believe they were in three other cities, but not Atlanta, which is unfortunate. All right. I think California, obviously, you know, if you look at the real estate purchases, California was number one destination. You know, for Chinese companies to come to the USA, certainly California, New York, you know, Boston, Massachusetts, Chicago, cities and states, they probably have upper hand. You know, this is all about branding, but I think we've done a great job in the last few years from state Georgia as well as from Metro and from all the agencies that I think we're getting our name out there to China. As a matter of fact, for your information, I think Nanjing is leading, Nanjing, China, is leading a delegation to 4 U.S. cities, and Atlanta is one of the 4 cities. So we're doing our part, I think, as you know, as private enterprise, as we're working with our government officials and Metro Chamber of Commerce. Yes, it's changing, but hopefully it's changing faster than what we like. So Atlanta will be one of the cities, not cities. But also, I think we should promote the fact that when we meet with companies, foreign investors, you know, this is the gateway to South America, Latin America. And also, I think I'm going to throw some numbers, economics. Past 10 years, I think the Southeast economy led by Atlanta and certainly Georgia is a critical part of it, has been outgrowing the national U.S. average in terms of GDP.
Well, thank you very much for a wonderful panel, and thank you for wonderful questions. We have a 15-minute break. Let's take a coffee outside. And